I remember a story from the 70s of a bus crashing into the Amazon River in Brazil. The people inside were eaten alive by piranhas. Horrific stories like this have been circulating since the discovery of South America. But every single piece of scientific research I've found says that piranhas don't kill people. So are these stories real, or are they just over-exaggerated urban myths? I've managed to unearth a newspaper report from the 1970s that describes the exact bus crash that I remember, where some of the passengers were eaten by piranhas. It reports that on the 14th of November 1976, the bus was travelling from Manaus to the town of Itacoatiara, a journey of about 5 hours. After driving through the night, it crashed into a tributary of the Amazon, killing 39 passengers. The newspaper also mentions the name of a survivor, Dirceu Araújo. I've managed to track him down to find out what he can remember from that fateful day, as this might allow me to pass judgment on the guilt or otherwise of the piranha.
Okay, so
Dirceu tells me he was sitting at the very rear of the bus, and like the rest of the passengers, he had been sleeping for most of the journey. On board that day were several families, a couple of students named Alex and Ivan, as well as many other men and women returning to their homes in Itacoatiara. Not long before the accident, the bus went through a pothole, waking Dirceu up. This, he tells me, could well have saved his life.
aqui é o lugar mesmo que aconteceu o acidente.
Nós viemos lá e caímos aqui.
This is the very spot where the accident happened. The bus came down here, went in the river down there.
Dirceu doesn't know if the brakes failed or if the bus skidded, but the driver had done the same route several times that day. The papers at the time reported the suggestion that he fell asleep, and at the ferry crossing carried straight on into the river.
1 minute everything's normal, but literally the next moment it's in the water. There were people crying, wailing, much despair.
Aí foi que eu fui no corredor, tá todo mundo lá querendo sair naquela porta.
There were people at the front trying to open the door by pulling it, and he's basically saying that that door only opens if you push. Then the water started to come in, at which point he went back to where he'd been seated.
Aí eu vi o pé dele, peguei e entrei.
There was a boy there who'd been trying to break the window, and he actually saw this boy's foot disappearing out of the bus, and he saw the foot, followed it, and managed to get himself out through the same hole.
39 people remained trapped on the bus and didn't survive. In the panic of his escape, Dirceu doesn't remember seeing any piranhas. So no one knows how long it was after the bus submerged that the piranhas attacked. It was several hours before rescuers could winch the bus out of the water. By that time, it was far too late for any remaining passengers.
Foi 3 meninas grandonas assim, e uma que é recém-nascida. Só, o resto tudo foi adulto.
There were 3 children and 1 baby, actually all from the same family. They were brought up dead. But he said lots of cases, 2, 3 people, the same family, died in this accident. Most of the bodies were recognisable, but there was one, he said, that...
Estava todo estragado por causa de piranha.
There was one body there, had literally been stripped of all the flesh, only the boots were left. Just everything else gone.
The man was later identified as Almandino França. I met his brother, Mabio, who has a theory as to what happened.
Ele achou que estava engatado, né? Ele estava com uma roupa, vamos dizer, com a sua forte.
He was wearing sort of quite strong clothing, and he reckons that, part of the clothing actually somehow got snagged on the bus, and possibly that's why he didn't
Como ele foi
escape.
identificado? Porque ele estava com a documentação no bolso, a identidade estava no bolso dele.
He only actually identified him because he had his identity document inside the pocket of his shirt.
Então, que eu meti o braço pensando que ia resistir nada. Estava leve, estava fácil.
The body of his brother was wrapped by then, and he picked the body up and he said, well, it was just so light, you could just tell, even though he couldn't see, could just tell that it was just bones there.
Se acha mais a piranha. Nós temos um peixe aqui. Tinha os outros que são predadores também, mas o principal é a piranha, né?
So he's saying that this would have been piranha that actually did this, basically just stripped the flesh from the body. There's lots of them there, it's well known.
The impact piranhas have on a human body is distinct and may be too shocking for some viewers to see. These horrific images from recent cases arriving at the Manaus City morgue show just what a piranha is capable of doing and the type of wounds it leaves. Exposed flesh and soft tissue are removed first, which is exactly what Dora de Barbosa witnessed when she arrived on the scene as the bodies were being extracted from the bus. She told me that some of the victims were brought out still hugging each other, and her story made me truly realise what it meant to lose someone in this crash.
Dora was just 17 years old at the time of the tragedy, and what happened, she was living in Itacoatiara, and she just actually started her nurse training at the time, and so she actually went to the river at the site of the accident.
Totalmente o rosto, não tinha nada no rosto, só mesmo nem as cartilagens mesmo tinha, então só os ossos.
That's pretty tragic. Dora says, she did know some of the people on the bus, which just makes it sort of extra horrific. Really, that was the husband of a teacher of hers, and she says that he was just, his face was completely eaten away down to, not down to the bone, but down to cartilage.
Just like the testimonies from the bus crash, the morgue pictures leave us in no doubt as to the horrors piranhas can inflict on a human body. But as the bus crash happened 30 years ago, it's impossible to know if the victims died of the wounds inflicted by the piranhas, or if they were already dead. We know that on the bus they were trapped, there was blood in the water, and people were eaten by piranhas. But did the piranhas attack and eat their victims alive, or did they merely scavenge the corpses of those who had already drowned? Germany is at the forefront of urban expansion. Although steeped in history, it is now coated in glass and steel. Hardly the place for a man-eating monster. Schlachtensee is a lake just 10 minutes from Berlin's city centre, and it's just become Germany's very own Loch Ness. This is where the attacks are happening. Over a mile long and up to 700 feet across, the lake was formed in the last ice age.
It's where literally thousands of Berliners come when the weather gets hot to cool off and swim in the water. But for those of them who haven't read the newspapers or seen the news reports, they could be in for a nasty surprise next time they dip their toe in these idyllic waters.
These cool waters have always been a refuge for Wells catfish, and falling to over 25 feet in places, it's plenty deep enough to hide an absolute monster. The attacks were localized, concentrated in 2 small areas. Strangely, areas, according to local fishermen, not traditionally the places to hunt for whales. So just what happened? I'm going to ask one of the victims, Jonas Veg.
What exactly did you do when you came down that day?
Maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I was swimming 10 or 20 seconds out of the lake. Suddenly something big bit me. I don't know what it was, but it was a very big shock for me. Pain and shock. it hurts very much, of course.
Almost exactly here.
Yes, right here.
In a freshwater lake so far from the sea, the last thing you would expect is to get attacked by a fish. It's just not supposed to happen. Being bitten by a wels is to experience the power of two hard plates packed with hundreds of needle-sharp teeth. Huge jaw muscles create a crushing force. A bite is like being grabbed by a vice covered in coarse sandpaper.
Before this happened, you used to quite enjoy coming here.
Of course, every day I was swimming here. But after that, yeah, I don't swim again. Normally, about 100 or 200 people are swimming here.
So definitely people have been put off, you think?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But Jonas wasn't the only victim. In almost the identical place, Katarina and her friend Clara had an encounter that has spooked them out of the water for good.
Just on a normal summer day, and we wanted to swim a little bit and meet friends, so we went to the lake.
Dann warst du wahrscheinlich in der schlechtesten Runde. Nee, ich war in der
We were swimming in the water, just treading water and talking to each other, and there was something swimming around our legs, but we couldn't really define it. I think it was like a snake in the water. Then suddenly there was something on my leg. Then there was a wound on my leg, there was blood. There were two parts, that part here and the other one on the other side. I went to a hospital with my mother. They reacted really shocked, the doctors, because they've never seen anything like that before.
And there were other attacks, the same pattern each time. Swimmers bitten on their legs, sent terrified out of the water, bleeding. Will these 21st century attacks prove that this European river monster is no medieval myth? Now I know what I'm dealing with. But to catch one, it's going to be a couple of days by boat to one of the few places where arapaima fishing is still allowed. After a day's travelling, we stop at a riverside town to spend the night. I'm not suggesting that the arapaima is responsible for all disappearances on the Amazon. This river has a full complement of killers, as I'm powerfully reminded when asking around for any fishermen's tales. This man lost his wife to a horrifying attack by the South American cousin of the alligator, the caiman. Just yards away, his poor daughter could only helplessly look on.
Aí semana fica aqui com a mamãe enquanto eu vou na casa do vaqueiro pedir socorro.
This gentleman's wife went fishing. On her way back, the boat actually sort of went over the top of a caiman. It hit the canoe, tipped her into the water, and then basically grabbed her.
Depois eu gritei, aí ele soltou ela. Aí depois eu atravessei o garapé.
The caiman had actually drawn away a little distance because of the commotion and the shouting, and then her daughter was able to go around the other side and pull her to land. But it just took so long to get help that despite rescuing her mother from the caiman, you know, she died of her wounds later on.
I decide to head to Manaus, the city at the heart of the Amazon, to see if I can get to the bottom of this memory and maybe track down a definite case where piranhas have eaten someone alive. And where better to start my investigation than the home of many a gruesome fisherman's tale, the Manaus fish market. With over 2,000 species of fish found in the Amazon River, more than the entire Atlantic Ocean, there's no shortage of strange-looking river monsters here.
Wicked-looking spines on there. Such a variety of fish here.
Scientists have determined that there are some 60 different species in the piranha subfamily, yet the majority of them are actually vegetarian. It is the flesh-eating behaviour of just a couple of species that gives them their reputation. And it's not long before my questions unearth another shocking account that shows just what they are capable of.
This is a piranha story. An old man was left in his floating house by his family just for a couple of hours. They came back, he'd gone. There were just his clothes there. So, they thought he must have gone to take a bath or something, but he wasn't in sight anywhere. They searched. Eventually, they found just his skeleton. I mean, literally, he'd gone in the water because he was old. He wasn't able to get back out, and the piranhas just had it. E faz tempo? Não, 2 meses. 2 meses? 2 months ago.
It's another gruesome story. But here at the market, I can't track down a name or definite location for this fisherman's tale. I'm going to have to search further afield to find an eyewitness to a lethal piranha attack. In the heart of the Brazilian Amazon, a truck makes a solemn path towards the local police station. It carries a macabre load, the corpse of a man. But the circumstances of his death were bizarre in the extreme. Fearing accusations of murder, the fishermen have taken the corpse to the police station in the exact state in which they found it. Just a pair of legs protruding from the mouth of a vast catfish. Could this wild tale emerging from the Amazon really be true? Or is this just a made-up fisherman's tale, and no more real than this photo recreation of what it might have looked like? And I've tracked down Sr. Valmir, one of the witnesses to this bizarre murder, to hear his story.
Basically, there's a bit of a frenzy of fishing activity going on. One of the nets got stuck on a rock. And in that situation, the only thing you can do, if you're not going to rip the net, you've got to go down and get it off. So this one fisherman dived in to free the net. However, what happened was that, he didn't come up.
Uma média de 4 horas.
4 horas?
4 horas pela boia.
The net came up, no fish in it, no fisherman. Nothing more was seen until about 4 hours later, when suddenly this huge fish appeared on the surface, and it was thrashing around because the fish was actually itself in trouble, actually choking. The fisherman was actually half inside the mouth of the fish, just the legs of the fisherman sticking out. And what happened then was that the fishermen all went to try and get the fish to net it, and he said, because it was obviously quite tired, it was quite easy, just one net. They got it in and clubbed it to death. They left his body inside the fish and then went to Manaus as fast as possible. Obviously, get it to the police station to make sure that there's no suspicion that it was a case of murder or anything like that. The murderer was identified as a piraíba, the largest species of catfish found here in the Amazon. So that fish could have been about 500 pounds. I mean, we are talking some seriously, seriously big fish here.
É peixe desse tamanho. Tem boca mais ou menos...
40 centímetros. 40 centímetros.
The mouth, about 40 centimetres across, so that's a couple of foot across, but he says it opens up more, so sort of maybe 2.5 foot. This was a pretty monstrous fish and a pretty horrific end for that particular fisherman. He says there are people disappearing all the time, and you never find a trace of them. You don't find the body, you don't find bones, you don't find anything. There were 15 shark attacks in Australia in 2008, but there's one, well reported in the press, that is central to my investigation. 16-year-old Brock Curtis Matthew is setting off with his friend Peter Edmonds for some early morning bodyboarding.
We got there maybe 8 o'clock-ish.
They've chosen a location next to the mouth of the Richmond River. This is a popular surfing spot, often used by these close friends. But this morning, after several days of heavy rain, they have the beach to themselves.
We were maybe like halfway to where we were going to go in the water. I turned around and came back in. And he kept going.
While Brock covers their possessions in case of more rain, Peter heads out. He's around 35 yards from the surf line. But as Brock goes to rejoin his friend, he glimpses a dark shape.
I saw this big, round, weird circle thing.
What Brock had seen was a shark. He has no idea it is attacking his friend. All he can see from 25 yards away is some splashing.
I was just thinking, oh, what's he doing? Something's not right.
Brock approaches as quickly as he can.
When I got like really close, I couldn't see any blood. And then like once I grabbed him and stuff, I noticed his leg.
Risking his own life, Brock carries his now unconscious friend towards shore.
I could have been attacked, I could have been killed. I didn't care. I didn't have anything in my mind except for I got to get him back to the beach.
From the shape and the size of the wound to Peter's thigh, the attacker appears to be a bull shark. Some 9 feet long. After the attack, lifeguard Stephen Leahy was one of the first on the scene.
It was obvious that it was high impact, it was hard hitting, and there was just a large amount of flesh removed from his upper thigh.
Leahy has worked to save lives on these beaches for over 15 years. But in this case, tragically, Peter had lost too much blood.
There was just absolutely nothing that we were going to do that would save this boy's life.
There's like a footpath bit there.
At first sight, this would seem to carry all the brutal hallmarks of a classic shark attack on the coast. But is there anything more that could be learnt from what happened? Dr. Vic Pedimores is the first person medical teams turn to when they believe there's been a shark attack. It's estimated that a shark bite applies a force of over 4 tons per square inch.
The most important thing for a shark is to get that lower jaw in, because those are the hooking teeth. That sort of latches in. So once it's got its lower jaw in, the upper jaw can clamp down. If that lower jaw has got in properly, it only needs one bite and it'll take the muscle straight off.
Because of the site of this incident, the lifeguard already had this attacker's identity in mind.
Knowing that the attacks happened just here, we always had in the back of our mind that this was going to be a bull shark incident.
It's likely that the shark had confused Peter for its common prey. A large fish, perhaps even another shark. Nothing can ever compensate a family or friends for such a cruel loss. But if there is anything to be salvaged from this terrible episode, it might be in identifying the warning signals that accompany a bull shark attack. Bull sharks have been observed congregating around river mouths after heavy rain, attracted by the supply of freshwater fish being washed out to sea.
We know the bull sharks will always hang around the river mouth after periods of heavy rain and when there are lots of fish around. The beach where the attack occurred is only 60 metres away from the entrance of that river mouth.
The bull shark that killed Peter Edmonds had been attracted to this shoreline because of its proximity to fresh water.
We're well and truly aware that there's just so much for the bull shark to live on in our freshwater systems. And that's part of the uniqueness of the bull shark. Can easily cope in salt water and in our oceans, but is just as comfortable in our river systems.
Perhaps this knowledge might prevent others being caught, like Peter, in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yet for thousands of people in the Amazon, life is literally lived on the water. With such huge seasonal variations in water level, entire villages float on the river. And there's one whose very name suggests the reality they deal with on a daily basis.
This place is known as the Piranha Reserve.
I've come here to find out what life is like living with the constant threat of piranhas. These people are known as ribeirinhos, or river people. Almost everything they need is sourced from or around the Amazon River.
Posso entrar?
I visit some of the families who live here to find out how they cope. But I discover a story of a piranha attack that chills me to my very bones. But what I soon learn is that it is in the dry season, when the water is low and the piranhas are concentrated, that the villagers are most at risk.
It is a particular time of year. It's principally the months of September and October here. The water is actually leaving the backwaters and all the little fish are swimming out, and basically the piranhas are there feeding on the small fish. So you've got a concentration of piranhas, and that is when the people here have to take extra care.
Não, aí é meio difícil porque senão a escada ela devora a pessoa, né?
You can't even get in the water to have a wash.
Aí tem que ter o vaso para ir tratando o peixe e jogando.
Main food item here is fish, so there you are. You have to clean the fish in order to prepare it for the meal, and just the smell of that will bring a concentration of piranhas there. So you've got to be careful. Keep your fingers nowhere near the water.
But on one occasion, this family dropped their guard, with horrific consequences.
It was a grandson of Julius.
Era a minha esposa.
Saying, you can't look after kids all the time. His wife was cleaning some fish off the back of the house, and the child just ran, as children do, from one side of the house to the other, and just fell in the water the other side. And he said, literally, they heard a noise, they got there, it was already too late.
A gente só via era os comeiros da piranha.
The child fell in the water and just didn't come up. All they said that they saw was just a turbulence in the water of the piranhas devouring the child, just literally moments after the child had fallen off the side of the boat.
Os ossos, né, da criança.
With nets, they were trying to sort of, retrieve the child, even while this was going on. And eventually, he said, all they got in was bones. E demorou quanto tempo para chegar nesse?
Esse foi rápido.
When I asked how long it took, he said, no, this happened very rapidly because there are just so many piranhas here.
This is what I'd been searching for, a first-hand account of piranhas attacking, killing and eating a human. In this case, a 3-year-old boy who the grandfather preferred not to name. Yet the reality of hearing a story like this takes away all feelings of success I might have had.
It's one thing to hear the myth of piranhas, but I mean, it's quite something else to talk to somebody who's actually seen the truth of that with their own eyes.
The wels is Europe's largest freshwater fish, capable of reaching over 200 pounds. I've been doing some research into this predatory member of the catfish family, and I'm finding that ever since records began, Europe seems to have had its very own well-documented freshwater man-eater.
It appears the Wels catfish is actually no stranger to making front-page news. There are stories about this species going back literally for centuries, portraying it as a man-eating monster. I've been doing a bit of research. Quite frankly, I had no idea it had such a reputation. Back in the 1500s, a human head and a hand with gold rings found inside the stomach. 1630, the corpse of a 7-year-old child. Body of a woman, 2 girls devoured. It just goes on and on. But all this is just so tantalizing. There are no hard facts and figures, unless, you count something like that. If that was the equivalent of your front page story in the 16th century, would you go in the water?
It would be too easy to dismiss these tales as the work of superstitious, unscientific medieval minds. Attacks and human body parts turning up in Wells's stomachs have been reported across Eastern Europe, from Russia to Poland, through the ages, right up to the present day. This river is just absolutely full of piranhas. Doesn't mean to say, though, that I can't do this.